Hello, low carbers. So for this episode, we have another special guest for the Low Carb Health Doctor platform. And in this podcast, it's quite special because it's been quite some time now that I have come across this very interesting and, let's say, provocative low carbohydrate health advocacy platform called Unlearn-Rethink, mostly on Facebook, and that made me wonder really who in the world is behind this platform. And it all the more made me picked because I was going through this platform and I encountered a lot of what was seemingly what I'd say conspiratorial yet mentally stimulating posts and infographics. So one day I eventually hunted him down, and today I am honored to have as a guest a registered dietitian nutritionist who is a member of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics and somebody I really admire for really having the courage of going against the grain. I'd like to welcome to the Low Carb Health Podcast, Tim Rice. So, Tim, would you like to say a few words to our audience?
Hello, I am honored to be here, and I'm very excited about having a discussion with you.
So, Tim, it's an honor to have you here. As you told me a while ago, this is your first time to go on video podcast, and probably
Yes,
among the first times that you'd be showing your face to the whole world out there, and especially
that's
those
right.
following the Unlearn-Rethink platform. Can you please give us a
Good.
brief background of yourself, what you do, and where you are coming from with your advocacy?
Well, um, back in 1999, I discovered low carb nutrition because I weighed 265 pounds. I was diagnosed, you know, I was prescribed a statin. I was diagnosed with pre-diabetes, which I don't even, pre-diabetes is not a thing. It's like being a little pregnant. It's not but anyway, it shook me up, and I started doing research, and I got so excited about helping my friends lose weight and reverse their diabetes that I I used to be I used to I used to work for a beverage company, and but it changed my life to the point where I wanted to go to school and learn more. And I thought that if I went to, the local university and got my credentials as a registered dietitian, that I would learn more. But you know what? They taught me all the wrong things. They taught me how to be really good at doing everything wrong. And, you know, and my experience in the outside world, it was not effective because they are obsessed with carbohydrates. They are convinced that it's a necessary, essential nutrient, and it's just simply not. And until that changes, it's just kind of treading water. I mean, it's like, yeah, I mean, don't eat junk food is the best thing that they will tell you. But to be obsessed with fruits and all the, you know, everything in moderation, or eat a balanced diet, eat the rainbow,
Eat right.
that's
Eat right.
that's yeah, that's just silliness. And the curriculum for a registered dietitian is not as science based as you would hope that it would be. It really wasn't. I found in my classes at university, I was that guy who was challenging the professor and asking him questions that nobody else was addressing, because being the older person in the classroom, I'm surrounded by, you know, 22 to 27-year-olds, they haven't lived long enough to get metabolic syndrome like I had, and to get obese like I had, and to get pre-diabetes like I had, and to be prescribed a statin because, I was 49. I'm the old guy in class. So, and I'm also not afraid of the professors. Young people tend to be intimidated by their professors. I I enjoyed challenging them, and because I was there to learn, not to just get good grades. I wanted to really, I wanted to make a difference. So, and it's very frustrating and it's saddening because the curriculum that they put registered dietitians through is is not is not conducive to really being helpful to people with metabolic diseases. And nowadays, that's 80% of the population. So I'm a big advocate as you got to do your own research and never stop. You have never finished learning, ever, ever, ever. Every day when you're on social media and you're like on a platform that is current, there's new studies that come out every month or so. I mean, there's always something going on, and read it and learn it. I mean, science is evolving constantly. You can't, whatever they wrote in that textbook that I was given when I was in university for, dietetics, 90% of it has, science doesn't ever stop, and thank God, because if it did, every time they came to some kind of conclusion, we'd still be, there'd still be cocaine and Coca-Cola. There'd still be lobotomies for depression, thank goodness that it's always changing. And, and that textbook, that's on the 16th edition, the original version was written in the early 90s. And, you know, science, good science, and when I say good science, I mean that isn't sponsored by, nefarious, like if it's a study about food and it's funded by the food industry, then confirmation bias, right? I mean,
Kellogg's,
yeah,
the
exactly. Yeah,
cereal industry, familiar with that.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, if there's if the study comes out, and like on the news, in the media world, the announcers or whatever you call them are always saying a new study came out and whatever, but they don't tell you who funded the study, where was it published in, was it a medical journal or was it published in Yahoo News? You don't know. They just call it a study, and then you're just supposed to suck it up and believe it. That's crazy. Anybody who on social media that tells you about a study and doesn't give you a link to the study, there's something fishy going on. They're either being lazy or they're trying to just confirm their bias. And you got to be smart about those studies, because there's a lot of bad ones out there. There really is. Just because it's a study in a medical journal doesn't mean it's right. You got to look. Okay, it's peer reviewed, but who are the peers? Are they peers that also have the same confirmation bias? It could be. You never know. Is all of these peers that reviewed it, are they all getting a paycheck from Kellogg's? You know what I'm saying? You and you're never going to find out that information without going to the study itself, because they'll always list who the peers were and they'll list who did the study, and you can look each one of those people up on the internet, because this is the information age and we have the internet, and it can be used for good or evil, but use it for good.
Yeah, and you know which bias that study is going for.
Right, exactly. That's why, yeah, I only believe a study if it isn't funded by the people that are are most likely to benefit from the results. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but as is the case for most studies, they are usually funded by some industry, uh, as how it goes these days.
Yep.
So even if it's
Well,
funded by
that's because
some, yeah,
and unfortunately that's because you studies are expensive, and usually it's the industries that have all the money. So, but sometimes when they're funded by a university, you can find non-biased ones, but you got to do a little bit of research and see who it is, that's doing this, and what their motives are, and when you read the study, you've got to look and see, you know what their methods were, because they have to disclose those as well, and sometimes you can find some nefarious things that way. I mean, like I've seen, it's been a while, but I've seen studies on the ketogenic diet, and then you look at their methods, and then you realize that they're what they consider a ketogenic diet is very different than what is actually a ketogenic diet. If you're not eating less than 20 grams of carbs a day, you're not going to get into ketosis. And if this researcher thinks that 50 or 120 is the magic number, then this whole study is BS, because that's not a ketogenic diet. And especially if in the headline they're going to use the word ketogenic, you got to understand what that is in the first place. And sometimes the researcher doesn't even know what they're doing.
exactly. Yeah.
So,
We go back a little bit to that part of what you said earlier about you having been, let's say, I think you've been into you got into the criteria of the metabolic syndrome yourself, I suppose, right?
oh yeah, oh yeah,
Yeah.
I had
So
the
how
yeah, I had
far? Let me ask you, how far into the metabolic syndrome you got to be? Like, you became obese already. Your
yeah,
laboratory tests are going
right.
haywire.
My A1C was up, just shy of 6, which I consider that diabetic now. But a lot of doctors, general practitioners, they're going to call that pre-diabetes, and they're not going to tell you you're diabetic until you're 6.3. But optimal is in the fours. So, and for so long, doctors believed diabetes to be a progressive disease that you can't do anything about. And now we know that's just not true. You can reverse it, just by changing the way you eat. But yeah, I had all that. And and it scared me, and but I didn't know anything. Even when I started the Atkins diet, I got the book, and I just skipped right to the what can I eat section, and I did what it said, and I didn't even read the damn thing. I didn't understand why it worked. I just wanted it to work, because I was just younger and vain or whatever. I just wanted to lose weight and whatever. But then, when I started, it was so effective for me. I went from 265 to 165 within a year.
Doing
And
the
people are
Atkins,
right. And
doing the
so many
Atkins.
people, yes, exactly. And so many people looked at me as like, how did you do that? And I told them, but then I wanted to understand why. And then learning, learning the mechanisms behind the low carb nutrition treatments, it motivated me to teach other people. And then, I somehow was told, and I don't know how true it is nowadays because there's so many people on the internet giving out nutrition advice that have no credentials whatsoever. But I thought I needed to get credentials in order to help people. So that's why I changed my life and I went back to college in my late 40s, you know. And it turns out that my protocols for helping people, which are almost always successful, are diametrically opposed to the protocols that a regular um, dietitian nutritionist would use. So it turns out that all that work I did, all those A's, all those exams, all of it was just an exercise in bullshit. Now I've got a little alphabet soup at the end of my name, but everything that I learned in there, I hardly use. I mean, I understand some principles that I did learn from them, but a lot of times all I learned was how wrong they are. Like important things like, do you know through my entire studies in college, I was never taught not how to figure it out, but even what nutrient density is. They don't teach registered dietitians what nutrient density is. Is that crazy? They and that's like the basis of life, and they don't even bring it up. You know,
And
and bioavailability. Your dietitian doesn't know what that is because they weren't taught that, and I know because just recently I wasn't taught that, and I got the same degree they do. They don't even know what it is. It's it's actually kind of scary.
that brings back the point about metabolic syndrome. Is this whole thing about metabolic syndrome, has it been part of the curriculum for dietitians now? The metabolic
Yeah,
syndrome. I mean,
yes. Well, I mean,
at least
nowadays, almost. I mean, you could just you when you've been doing this as long as I have, I could walk around the Walmart and I can see metabolic syndrome because the chances are, if somebody is morbidly obese, it's very likely that they also have a high A1C. It's also very likely, and then I don't even want to get into the cardiovascular, HDL, LDL, all that, but that's a controversial subject. But I'm sure that they have the same kind of doctors that I did that told me that I needed to be on a statin. So I mean, you can just walk through a mall and you see metabolic syndrome everywhere, and I'm not even a doctor. I can see it. It's and it's I'm old enough to remember. I remember the 70s. I remember the 80s. There was maybe one fat kid in class, but now maybe there's one or two skinny kids in class. Everybody's fat. Even
it's the
even
norm now.
in
It's
mid
the norm now to be fat.
I
It
know
seems to be the
in
norm.
I know, and they're in middle school or high school. They haven't even gotten a chance. That metabolic syndrome is happening at a younger age. Back before we had junk food everywhere, it took decades for you to beat yourself up to the point where you were obese. But now, man, you can do that at age 12, easy. You know, because there's just so much junk food, and what's really scary is that dietitians are telling you what they believe to be healthy. A lot of it is causing the problem. They don't even think that vegetable oil. They think, oh, it's got the word vegetable in it. It must be good for you. And, and no, you know what? It's not. And there's a lot of deception going on. All this moderation and balance, and it's once you have pushed yourself to metabolic syndrome or obesity or diabetes, you if you want to reverse it, you have to be a little extreme, and you can't be a baby about it. You can't, well, I'm going to eat good for 4 days a week, and then I'm going to eat like an idiot all weekend long. That's not the way your metabolism works. I mean, you're not doing yourself any favors, and I come off as a zealot a lot, but I know it works. And if I come off as a zealot, you know what? I'll wear that badge proudly.
This thing about, the you mentioned about diabetes, pre-diabetes, it's all the spectrum of the sugar levels that people have. So the funny thing is, most doctors worldwide would tend to say that, since, for example, there's a cutoff, and I think you're aware of that. Like, for example, in order for one to be diagnosed a diabetic, it has to be having a fasting blood sugar of about 126 at least
Right.
milligrams per deciliter. There is, and then the thing is, if you go through the criteria for metabolic syndrome, then you have pre-diabetes already there, because even if your fasting blood sugar or fasting blood glucose is just 100 or somewhere higher than that, and is not yet in the levels of the 126 and above, then you are already into the criteria of the metabolic syndrome. So that's what is officially labeled as pre-diabetes. I'm sure you're familiar with that, right?
Yes.
So the point is, many studies have already come out that even if you are labeled a pre-diabetic, then you are already at high risk for complications, especially complications related to the cardiovascular system in terms of atherosclerosis. And in my case, I'm a neurologist. I most often see those complications in the form of stroke. And
Right.
for the cardiologists, it would be the heart disease, especially the heart attack, as lay people would define that, and which in medical parlance would be called myocardial infarction. So I think people
Right.
should be more aware of that these days.
Yes. Yes. And you know what? It it's just you've got to. I'm always looking at the big picture. It's all about longevity, and everybody wants that. Everyone, right? I mean, who doesn't want to live a long, healthy life? You don't want to be debilitated when you're a senior. You you want to be you want longevity, and that's food really is medicine. You know, some people just don't even realize that, but Hippocrates had it. He knew what he was talking about. Food is medicine, and it also can be poison. And it can be simple, and it can still be delicious. It really can. And you can turn around like almost every metabolic disease can be reversed by changing your lifestyle. Period. I mean, it's just a fact. And I know this not just because I did it for myself, but I've been a witness to, I mean, after a decade and you're obsessed like I am, I mean, I've seen hundreds of people lose hundreds of pounds and reverse their diabetes. It's so common to me, but you'd be surprised. It's a mystery to most. And that's why we got to get the word out, Doc. And I'm glad that you have a format like this to where we can share our ideas and thoughts.
It would be much better than, because I used to do well. I have content in my platform wherein I'm presenting data, facts, and I'm explaining metabolic syndrome and all that. But having people like you to chat also is very, very helpful for the audience everywhere, because it's like they see that it's not just me talking about this,
Right.
but there are more and more people around the world who have awakened to the truths out there, and and the lies as well, and are actually doing something
Yes.
to help other people become more aware of what's really the real thing in nutrition, and that's where we are
It's
actually.
exciting. And something that's exciting to me is when somebody changes their lifestyle and reverses their metabolic disease or whatever, and they're so excited and they get the same excitement that I have, and they start, you know, proselytizing to their friends or whatever, and the next thing you know, they're sharing all of their knowledge on social media, and then it's like I've seen I don't know. I think she's Filipino. Low-Carb Lodi. Do you know her?
Low carb.
Annie. She's. Oh, I forget. But anyway, I've watched her. She reversed her. She was just overweight. But anyway, she's turned her platform. She's got more followers than me now. And I'm just, that's so exciting to me when I see people get pumped, and then it's like you're just spreading seeds around and watching trees grow. You know what I mean? And that there is nothing more thrilling than that. But when you turn someone who doesn't know anything, and then the next thing you know, they're just as obsessed as I am, and they're helping people. And the more of that we can get going on, you know, because you can't always count on your doctors and your nutritionists. I mean, there's a few doctors that get it, and you're one of them. But for every one of you, there's 200 that don't, and all they want to do is throw around
more than 200 probably.
Oh, I'm sure, and all they want to do is they're just a master of the prescription pad, you know.
Yeah, so the way I explain it to my patients, I'm sure your audience would also appreciate it, is that I explain to them that their health is their personal responsibility, not mine, not any other doctors, because
Yes,
essentially if they want longevity, as you mentioned earlier, then they should at the very least make it a point to learn more about how to achieve that, right? Longevity, because if it so happens that the doctor or the dietitian they're saying are giving them the wrong facts and are giving them the wrong advice, then who's going to suffer in the end but themselves,
right,
right?
exactly. And what's really exciting about this whole thing is that it really is very simple, but people don't realize that. And you know, the more we get the word out, the better. Because, when people reverse their problems, when their aches and pains go away, you know, they get excited about it. And, we got to make that happen. We got to spread the word. I feel like a preacher, but it
But
is.
yeah,
I
at
mean,
the
it
very
is.
least,
Yeah.
yeah, I'd say we are indeed walking our talk,
Yes.
right?
Yes. And
It,
and
it's
and
it's the
it's
best way to be a preacher. At the same time, you're actually walking your talk because you've been there, right? Like me, we both have been through metabolic syndrome. At the very least, I was pre-diabetic, and then afterwards we fixed it ourselves
right.
without medication.
Right.
And then I'm a physician, I'm a neurologist, you're a dietitian, and it's like we know what we're talking about. It's
Right.
not that we're just spreading a false message.
Well, it's very
Huh.
empowering. It's like when you can fix you literally are fixing yourself, and once you figured out how to do it, it's empowering, and it's exciting. It's like just it's got to be from what I eat, but you know what? And I know this may sound crazy, but I don't get colds. I don't get flus. I and the naysayers, you know, they're they're getting some kind of illness, quarterly, and I don't never get sick. I didn't even get COVID, whatever. I mean, Natural immunity, maybe it's a real thing. I don't know, but I can't remember the last time I had a flu. I can't remember the last time I had a cold. And it's so simple. You just eat the right things, and you can. I've got energy. I mean, you can tell I'm hyper. I've and it's nighttime over here where I'm at, and it just it makes you feel good. To have energy to do things. It's like I'm bordering on being an older man. It's like I'm closer to 60 than I was to 50. But I tell you what, I feel healthier right now than I did in all of my 30s.
When you're at the height of your metabolic syndrome, I
Oh
suppose.
yeah, yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's just it's so empowering when you learn how simple it is. You know, a lot of people you don't realize that sugar really is an addiction. And that's what it really is. If you can break that addiction, that is more than half the battle. Because once you don't crave things with sugar, then low carb is easy. You know, when
And then,
you can see that cupcake and not even want it. You 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 don't drive treat it like an addiction. Because it really is. It's an addic- it's an addic-
definitely agree with that.
Well, it's definitely an addictive substance, and it's pretty obvious because when you quit it, you go through withdrawals, just like if it was alcohol or opiates or whatever. It's a different kind of withdrawal, but what do you think the keto flu is? That's withdrawals, baby. You just gotta, mind your electrolytes, and that feeling will go away in a week. You know, it's so
Yeah.
much easier than you think, but you know, a lot of people won't give up their yummies. They gotta have everything has to be yummy. They have the taste palate of a toddler for life. Everything's got to have sugar in it. And it's funny because like I have relatives that don't get it, and they say, "Oh, taste this, it's delicious." And I just want to say every time it's like, well, of course it's delicious. It's loaded with sugar. Sugar is delicious. It's always going to be delicious. If you want to impress me, why don't you put on your chef hat and go make something that's healthy that doesn't have sugar in it and it still tastes good, and then we'll let the doves fly. But if you just add a sugary sauce to something to make it delicious, I'm not impressed. Foodies. I'm all
So,
over the
all
place.
that thing about addiction, carbohydrate addiction, I particularly appreciate the platform of Dr. Robert Sives. You're familiar with him?
Yes, yes.
He calls himself the carb addiction doc.
Yep,
Yeah,
yep,
so he focuses towards that direction.
yep.
So, since you are with the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, which used to be called the American Dietetic Association,
Yeah,
correct?
yes,
Right.
yes. I
So
think I
so
think
you should,
they had to change their
yeah,
name, I think, because the
yeah. So
ADA is the American Diabetes Association.
yeah, so you should perhaps be aware what is the current position of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics now with regards to, let's say, what it officially recommends as the proper diet for humans. Would you be aware what the position of the organization would be right
Well,
now?
right now, well, it changes, but the latest that I've seen, and that's just in the last 2 years, they tout the Mediterranean diet. That seems to be, but there, but a lot of them don't really understand what the Mediterranean diet is because, and the whole history of Ansel Keys and all of his cherry picking information for his studies and whatever. They eat bread in the Mediterranean, but they use olive oil, which is good, and they eat meat, which is good. But they're also obsessed with vegetables. There's nothing wrong with vegetables, but not the starchy ones, But if you ask three different dietitians what the Mediterranean diet is, you'll get three different answers. It's you're not even. I mean, that's just a diet that has a name. There's no what are the macronutrients of a Mediterranean diet? Nobody can answer that. What is it? What a diet that Ansel Keys discovered while he was in the Mediterranean? That's not helpful. Tell me what to eat, man. don't just give it a name, and just because it does have some good elements, but there's other things that happen in the Mediterranean. Like, they also went for walks traditionally, a lot of them after every meal, which is also a great thing. But that isn't about food. That's usually, like, when you read the parameters of a diet, it doesn't end with, now go take a walk for 20 minutes. It just tells you what to eat. Whatever, I'm rambling now.
So you're saying something about the Mediterranean diet. The problem with that, which I do agree with you with regards to the Mediterranean diets, there's no exact definition about the macronutrient components of the Mediterranean diet. As
Right.
you said, it depends on who you're asking
Right.
and what particular authority of the Mediterranean diet is defining it, right?
Right.
And unlike like when you say, let's go for a low carbohydrate diet with these parameters, like let's say you have to limit your carbohydrate, especially the refined carbohydrates, to a maximum of, like, let's say 5 to 10% of the total caloric intake for the day. At least we have some figures there to limit ourselves to, and we can also particularly define which particular foodstuff
Right.
and or which foods are actually low in carbohydrate. What's the component? What's the macronutrient component for each food stuff that you are coming up with?
Exactly. And what's funny? There's so many different kinds of diets for so many different reasons, and a lot of them are just just an exercise in just frustration, because you're constantly having to think about, what can I eat, that can I not eat that, what it's like, it's really simple. And other dietitians, they did learn what gluconeogenesis is. The fact that your liver can create all the glucose that your body needs without you having to eat it. They did learn that, but it's like they don't believe that it's real, because they think it. If you want to exhaust yourself, count all your calories and all your carbs. I mean, you're adding frustration to your life. If you don't eat any carbs, you're going to be fine, and you don't have to count nothing. You don't have to count calories, which is ridiculous anyway, and you don't have to count carbs. Just don't eat them. And when you do eat carbs, just be smart about it. If you want fruit, eat low stuff that you already know is low carbohydrate. Like your blueberries, raspberries, strawberries, etc. If you want to have vegetables to put on your plate, you know which ones are green, you know which ones are cruciferous, like your broccolis or whatever. All you got to know is that the root vegetables and the are starchy, and you don't eat those. And you don't have to count stuff. You don't have to have the little MyFitnessPal app, and where you got to look up every little food. You know already, because you're only eating real food. You don't need to look up brand names of this and brand names of that, because you're not eating things that have a label, that have ingredients. You're just eating meat and vegetables and occasional fruit, and it becomes delicious, and life is good, and you're healthy, and you're not obsessed with food anymore.
So going back to that thing about carbohydrates you're talking about, I'm sure everyone has heard that most health professionals will say that carbohydrates are needed by our body for energy. It's
Right?
the same thing taught to nutritionists
Right, right.
in nutrition school.
Yeah, well, they refuse to believe that you can get energy from ketones, which is the product of getting your energy from fat. Fat and carbohydrates truly are the only two ways your body can get energy, but your body, whatever mechanisms in your body that require glucose, your body can make it. Period. And I'm not saying that all carbs are bad, but common sense would dictate which ones are good and which ones are bad. If it's junk food, it's bad. Who can't figure out if it's junk food? If you look at something and it doesn't appear to be junk food, first of all, if it's in a box and it's got more than 3 or 4 ingredients, it's junk. If you don't know what those ingredients are, you ain't never heard of them before, you got to be a little bit leery about it, because they'll put emulsifiers in there that aren't even supposed to be for human consumption. So, I mean, but you can simplify your life if you just eat real food, because you don't have to be a master of the ingredients label when it's just broccoli, steak, etc., etc. You know what I'm saying? I get
Uh,
I get worked up and frustrated.
your organization there in the U.S., the Academy for Nutrition and Dietetics, I find uh, it has a big impact, not just there in the U.S. but also worldwide, because as we have talked about earlier, it used to be the American Dietetic Association, and it comes up with recommendations and position papers. And I'm not sure if you are aware that the website says it's called, the website of that organization, of your organization, is eatright.org,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
so it supposedly encourages everybody to eat right. Then the big question is, how do you eat right?
Yeah. Exactly.
So yeah, and the position paper of like groups like your group, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, matters for a lot of people worldwide, because essentially the recommendations that your group is making is more or less the same recommendations that other groups of nutritionists and dietitians around the world are also coming up with. So,
Well,
uh,
exactly.
and
Exactly.
yeah,
And I'm just a thought. The curriculum that they have when they're teaching dietitians, the whole point to them is to back up that they don't call it a food pyramid anymore. They don't call it that. They call it my plate. But the whole
why do
curriculum
you think
is
so?
the whole.
It's essentially it's the my plate. The way I look at it, it's just another version of the food pyramid.
Oh,
It's the same thing.
exactly. That's what they'll say. If you bring up the food pyramid, then they're going to tell you, well, it's not the food pyramid, it's my plate. And it's like, yeah, but it's the same thing, because it's got all, like, the most frequently eaten foods. They still think it should be bread and starches and pasta and grains, and that's the one you should eat the least, not the most. You know, and but their whole curriculum is to back up all of that bad science. So it's almost like, and it's a shame. You know, I worked hard to get my credentials, but it's almost like when I hear somebody that's about to speak and they're a registered dietitian, the chances are that they have that old school convoluted protocol, and it's shameful to me because I don't, you know, I almost don't want to tell people that I'm a registered dietitian anymore, because I know that 95% of them are bullshit. They don't get it, and they don't want to, because in their world they can have sugar. Sugar is healthy. It's not, but you know, everything in moderation.